Hello, hello, hello. Oh, hello. I'm up on a little podium, which I had last year, and I didn't feel I needed it this year, but this is a podium set up for our next special guest. So I'm very excited. I feel very tall and powerful. I'm going to say a couple of quick things about just housekeeping. I know that's a little bit rote, but we need to get it done. Please ensure you have your badges with you while you're in the Screen Forever conference area. They're really important that they be worn. The only time you don't need them is at the awards, where if you just bring your ticket along, that's great, and you'll look beautiful in whatever you're wearing. Encouraging everyone to download the app. If you haven't already done that on the program, there's a QR code, you can do that, but it'll just allow you to do all of the things you need to do. And it's through that app that is the audience Q&A piece, which from tomorrow we're starting to activate and use, all right? I want to just talk a little bit about the quiet room. We've extended the use of the quiet room, and we got a lot of really positive feedback about it. And the quiet room's open, therefore, at all times while the sessions are running. It's there to escape what can be a pretty full-on and intense experience and stimulating environment here. But this isn't a secret meeting room. This is not a place to go and do a few emails. Please respect that some delegates benefit from this quiet zone, so follow the rules and leave the space for those who really need it. And on that note, the SPA team really want to thank our Screen Forever Access Coordinator, Steph Dower. And people that know Steph, she's a wonderful asset to the industry. Yeah, let's give Steph a call. She's so wonderful. She's supporting us on council in so many ways, and she's been invaluable helping to guide and engage with delegates to ensure we're getting accessibility right. If you have other questions or need some help, we've got a lot of wonderful volunteers that I'll single out at the awards to thank, who are wearing the black Screen Forever t-shirts, and we really do thank them for volunteering their time. And a final note about daylight savings. I know everyone's clock's ticked over, but importantly, obviously we're in Australian Eastern Standard Time without daylight savings here. But when we're dealing with the sessions and events, we've always had the problem of both this week and next week where people haven't necessarily set their phones in the right way, so they turn up either late or the next day or whatever it is. So please just kind of pay attention to all of that. All right. Now, logistics over. This is the most important lecture this industry delivers each year. The Hector Crawford lecture. And we're in for a lot of fun. Let's make it so serious, we're in for a lot of fun. You can deliver good messages with a lot of humour, people. Hector Crawford was born in 1913. I think it's a good reminder of where this comes from. Fitzroy, Melbourne. He started his career in radio. When he introduced television in the mid-50s, he transitioned to TV, and he encountered broadcasters who were planning to fill their schedules with in-house and foreign content. He became and is renowned as being a powerful and passionate advocate for Australian content, Australian stories, Australian creativity. Together with his sister Dorothy, he produced seminal Australian television such as Homicide, Division 4, Matlock and The Sullivans. In 1969, Division 4 was played at noon over the Christmas period during a non-ratings period, receiving Australian content credits, and the actors were not being paid residuals. And this sparked the TV Make It Australian campaign that Hector spearheaded. And of course, we continue to unite for a robust regulatory framework that will allow our industry to make it Australian under the same banner. So our annual lecture is dedicated to Hector Crawford's legacy. Our industry needs more people like Hector, passionate public advocates for the power of Australian stories and how our screen is working. And this year, the Hector Crawford will be delivered by one of the Australian screen industry's most important and loved storytellers and contributors, one of the most prominent figures in Australian society, Magda Szubanski. Did I get that right? I did get it right. Beautiful, thank you. Oh, that's a little early. Wait. I'm just going to build this up a little bit more. There's few people, though, that a bit like Madonna and Cher can get away with just a word, it's Magda, and everyone knows who you're talking about in Australian society. She has the biggest profile, I think, for an Australian personality in Australia. She's so well loved. I think it becomes a very interesting conversation to have with Magda about what that love of being loved in the way that she has been embraced by Australian society is. And her brand is something bigger than her. And I think it's interesting trying to understand, I think for somebody in that limelight, how big her brand is and how well trusted she is as a consequence. But when you have that level of power and influence, I'm always impressed at the people that turn that for good and are doing wonderful things to advocate, promote, engage, and be very thoughtful about how our community operates. So to that end, it is such a delight to welcome someone who I met a number of years ago at a dinner party was so unassuming, so engaging, so wonderful. Please welcome to the stage Magda Szymanski. Magda! This is like a Taylor Swift moment, only slower.
It's quite an entrance. Oh, for God's sake. Hello. Oh, hello, everyone. I've got that there because if my hands are cool, I feel calm. First of all, I just think let's just loosen up a bit. Trying to be professional with my radio mic. I feel at a disadvantage because you do know my name. And I would like... Do you know what my actual full name is? Okay. Magdalena Maria Teresa Szymanska. If you could just repeat that after me, please. Yeah, no, right. Anyway, you know me. My name's Magda. I don't know you. I don't know what your names are, so it seems rude. So please, on the count of 3, could you all yell at me your names? 1, 2, 3. No, sorry. This side was all right, but in the middle. Can we just do it again? 1, 2, 3. No, sorry, there's still a problem. Just in here. 1, 2, 3. No, there's a problem. Just here. 1, 2, 3. Sorry. Sophia. Sorry. Sophia. No, I heard you. I'm just sorry. It's a crappy joke, but look, I'll do some trust acting exercises later. I'm hoping you trust me now because I'm actually sort of leading on from what Matt was saying. When you have a position of trust in the community, what do you do with that? And I have really debated very hard whether this is a subject I should weigh into or not. And I've got my backpack here because I might be making a hasty exit. So, first of all, I'm going to pick up on that word storytellers and story because I always feel like I don't even know what that means. Fucking Robert McKee, you know, because he just basically, he's made a lot of money out of that, hasn't he, really? So I looked it up in the Oxford Dictionary, and in its simple form, it just means an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. A plot, a storyline, a piece of gossip, a rumour, a false statement, a report of an item of news in a newspaper. So that's what apparently story is, but I think we make something altogether different of what story is, and we think of ourselves very differently as storytellers. And I know that my journey as a storyteller has changed considerably, starting off feeling really only safe to do comedy, and then turning, as I get older, into being much more interested in reality and fact and documentary and seriousness, although I reserve the right to be humourless or humourful, depending on my mood, and a great legacy from my Scottish mother, I will never lose the sense of my own ridiculousness. I think that is a crucial mental health hygiene, actual underpinning of how to feel sane, is to never forget that sense of your own ridiculousness. But we call ourselves storytellers, so what does that actually mean? So you think about Percy Shelley, who said, "Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world." A similar thing, the Irish here will, come on in, stragglers, make yourselves at home. Don't worry, I won't single you out yet. The Irish of you might know the poet Arthur O'Shaughnessy. Have you heard of him? He said, Arthur O'Shaughnessy, and bizarrely, my grandfather was Irish, and I discovered a new friend, Carla, who's sitting here, who came from about 20 minutes from where my grandfather, who had a brutal upbringing. Anyway, Arthur O'Shaughnessy said, "We are," this is speaking of poets, "we are the music makers and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we," and this is where the phrase comes from, We, the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. For each age is a dream that is dying or one that is coming to birth. So, if that is the sort of power that we have, what right does any one of us have to tell a story? What makes us think that we have a right to be here in this room and to put out into the world what our version of events is? No matter what, and I'm not talking about equity or any of that. I mean in the sense of, are we here because we think it's a cool world to be in? Or are we here because we actually think there's something important to say? Do we think we have a piece of the puzzle that might be missing? So, interestingly, what you might not know is that romantic nationalism, that poetry of the 19th century began with a funny little philosopher, pastor, linguist called Joseph Gottfried Herder, who's a German. And he wrote, "A poet is the creator of the nation around him. He gives them a world to see and has their souls in his hand to lead them to that world." And the terrible irony is that Herder was the one who started that whole deep interest in nationalism, and really the notion of ethnicity sort of began in the late 1700s with Herder. And what he saw the world as being was a mosaic where each ethnicity, rather than being denigrated or valued differently, had a beautiful piece of how life is to be done that could be contributed to the world's understanding. And that is a gorgeous vision of owning your ethnicity. And then what it turned into was Nazism. And the disintegration from the part of the world that my name comes from, Magdalena Maria Teresa Szubańska, is how you would say it, degenerated into the most horrible ethnic conflicts. And this is where I'm going to embark on the really uncomfortable part of the conversation. So the other thing I want to say is, in terms of story, the latest neuroscience, there's a terrific book called How Emotions Are Made. And the theory of this book, and this is based on the latest research, we all think that emotions are universal, that we share them, that they're the same the world over. But according to the latest studies, they're not. There are only 4 basic states: arousal, calm, pleasantness, and unpleasantness. And everything else is a story that we invent to try and predict, control, or explain events. So there are emotions that exist in other cultures that we don't even have. Now, this is like the ultimate existential position. This is like going totally commando. Even more than, I do love my history. I love my Russian history, which is weird for a Pole, but anyway. But those Russian nihilists of the 19th century who eschewed every belief, who threw it all out and said, we start from scratch, we believe in nothing. There is a courage in that, but as we can see, they used that, it was like when Nietzsche said God is dead, we now are capable of anything. That is actually the power we hold in our hands. Matt was saying that most people learn about the world through the visual medium, through film, through TV. So I think thinking about what right do you have to stick your oar in and say your bit, and I don't think because I'm a fat, short lesbian, with an ethnic background, that actually gives me a right to tell a story. I feel I have to actually earn that right. I have to feel like I have something to contribute. Otherwise, give the stage over to someone else. I'm not quite ready to do that yet, but... So I come from such a mixed background, Polish, Eastern European, Slavic father. Just out of interest, do you know Slav, do you know what that is the root word for, another word that comes from Slav? Slaves is based on the word Slav. So a lot of the people of those Eastern European nations, that's where that word comes from. But, you know, the other fascinating thing that Churchill said of the Balkans and Eastern Europe is it produces more history than it can consume itself. But what this is bringing me to is I want to tell some stories about my father. Now, can I just ask, who's read Reckoning, my memoir? Not enough people. Okay. All right. I should have brought some books. So I'm going to tell you stuff that you may or may not know. The first line of the memoir is, if you had ever met my father, you would never for an instant have thought he was an assassin. Because my father was an assassin in a top secret counterintelligence unit working for the Polish resistance. He and my entire family hid Jewish people throughout the war. My grandfather smuggled guns into the ghetto. My aunt, again, this goes back to the Slavic thing. It's so ironic. The Aryan look is apparently blonde-haired, blue-eyed, but that's the Slavic look. That's what Slavic people look like, the Circassians, you know, Boris Johnson, that hyper-blonde sort of look. Highly sought after as slaves. But you know, I shouldn't have dyed my hair blonde, should I? Stupid. He was, no, I've lost my thread now. Matt, it's your fault. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, green-eyed look, which is supposedly Aryan, because my aunt had the blonde-haired, green-eyed look, she ended up actually hiding a Jewish child in her bed, and eventually the child was singing in Yiddish, and because he knew no other language, and a neighbour said to my grandmother, Mrs. Schubainska, you're going to have to get rid of that child. We can all hear that child singing. Now, they're the kinds of real-life, real-time moral dilemmas that my family was dealing with. My father has told me many, many stories, and I'm going to tell you one of his stories at the end, which is the one that just absolutely breaks my heart. But because of that, I was invited, I wrote that book, I was then, two very striking invitations came my way. One was that I was asked to be an ambassador for Phoenix, Australia, which is the National Centre of Excellence for Post-Traumatic Mental Health, because my book, Reckoning, is completely about intergenerational trauma. And I wrote it in 2015 when it wasn't such a sexy word and not everyone was triggered. So, as you can imagine, the amount of research and work I did on that. I know, and this is not, honestly, if you want a little rundown of my career and what I've done thus far, if you know who I am, you know that already. If you don't know, you don't care. So I'm just going to talk about what I think is interesting and keep going with this. And the other request was to go on a dual narrative tour to Palestine and Israel in 2019. And I don't know how anyone else is feeling, but I'm beside myself with everything that's going on in that region. And I feel like I have to be completely silent for a number of reasons. I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to hurt people who are already incredibly hurt. I don't know if anything I say is going to be of any value. And also, I'm afraid of backlash. I'm afraid that I'll say something. I was nervous even about this, like, should I, shouldn't I, you know? Everyone is so, the tinderbox is so dry. But then I think about, you know Yuval Noah Harari, the historian? Oh my God, he's brilliant, Israeli historian. And he said, we are all so traumatised now that we can't think. We can't think for ourselves. And to me, that felt like a call to those of us who are perhaps a little bit less traumatised, and this is where my ambassadorship for Phoenix Australia help design the international guidelines for how to treat trauma. So these are proper serious trauma people. They're like the shit, right? And so when people are traumatised, there's something that happens. So the model they use is, imagine your brain is like this, your fist, right? This bit here, your thumb, is the lizard brain, the primitive brain, the amygdala. And this bit over here is the flimsy, very recent flap of prefrontal neocortex, the modern brain, the rational brain. And what happens when you're traumatised is that you literally, they call it, you flip your lid. The two become disconnected, and the lizard brain just runs the show, and the rational cognitive brain can't think, can't reason. And one of the ways that you can actually get the two connected again is just to do that exercise, just to think to yourself, I have flipped my lid, and do that, and then just the mere thinking of that can help you to bring it back online. So I was talking to my brother, and he really has a way, very often, of just cutting out the bullshit. Like when my mum was dying, and it was, I don't know if you've been there when an elderly parent's dying, it's so brutal. And she's there looking like a collapsed in, like a zombie, you know. And as Chris said, my brother said, he said, oh, that's a bit fucking confronting. And we were talking about Palestine and Israel, and he said, yeah, all anyone ever wants you to do is to pick a side. And I was like, that's right. So what I'm doing today is I refuse to pick a side. I refuse to take either position. I have friends in Palestine at this very moment who I've been speaking with, who are involved in peace talks with Israelis, trying desperately to find bonds, to create, if you're going to talk about stories, to create new narratives. We're burdened with a whole lot of, look, I worked in a women's refuge. I know those extreme ideologies. And the extremities are going to pull us over the edge of the cliff into the abyss. And I think that there's an old rule of thumb from social work that 20% of the people cause 80% of the problems. Most of us want to live in peace. I feel, I could be wrong, and I'm just throwing this out there, but I feel it's a time to find the most caring way that we possibly can to hold that middle ground, to hold the peace, to try and be rational and to be as kind as we possibly can. There's a terrific word that Mushahin Hendricks, who's the first sort of gay imam who was actually speaking up here in Sydney at the World Pride event. And he used the most beautiful term. It's why I love a lot of religious sort of language. He said, instead of confrontation, carefrontation. And I think as storytellers, what do? Do we defer the stories till afterwards? Or do we try now to use stories to heal in the best way that we possibly can? Or do we stay? I think whatever we do, we have to proceed with great caution. But I think so many of us are beside ourselves. I know I am distraught. So I'm just going to say one other thing too. Because of my family background, I felt like I understood anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, right? And then I went to Yad Vashem, and I grew up seeing pictures of my father in the midst of all of the Holocaust images. And when I went to Yad Vashem, there was one picture as we went through, and it was two angels, a Christian and a Jewish angel. It was pictures of statues, and the Jewish angel had her head bowed and her scepter broken. And I just burst into tears, because even with all that I knew, the stories my father told me, and I'll tell you one of these at the end. The stories my father told me, I thought I had pretty much heard it all. But a penny dropped then, and I went, no one, I think, really appreciates systemic anti-Semitism. That to be the whipping boy for 2,000 years, to be the go-to scapegoat every time any other country feels insecure, must be a terrifying experience. Then we went to Palestine, and we went to a camp, a refugee camp, and met with a guy there whose son had been shot, and he'd been shot in the face. And he spoke of what his situation was. And then we met another guy who had been a terrorist. He was in prison for 10 years, a Palestinian. And when he was in prison, he taught himself English, and he read Nelson Mandela, and he watched, the Holocaust film, Steven Spielberg. Schindler's List. And he said it completely changed his mind. And now he's part of a group called Combatants for Peace. And he works with ex-IDF soldiers. Another friend of mine there, who I'm still in contact with, Moira Jeleni, her husband was shot randomly by an IDF soldier. She goes around still, now, today, goes around with they go around in twos, her and then an Israeli counterpart, who lost his daughter to a bombing in the Intifada, and they're called Parents Circle. And so, this conflict has gone on for so long and it has been so horrific, and I've got no idea what to do, except to focus on the people who are striving for peace and to tell their stories, because I think, damn Aristotle for telling us that stories about conflict, because I think that's the model that we've used, and there's just not, if it doesn't, if it bleeds, it leads, and if it's a terrible story, the news will report it, but how can we amplify stories of the 80% of people who just want to frickin' live in peace? Now, I won't go on. The courage and the big-heartedness of those people that's the only thing I can think of to do, to just embrace them, but also to hopefully say to any Jewish or any Palestinian people, there is no false equivalences. My heart breaks for all of you. And the other thing I want to talk about is just generally the kind of spirit of dehumanisation, because none of these things ever can happen. I mean, as I said, slave. As a Pole, we were classified as Untermenschen. And that's why I'm going to tell you this last story, because this is one from my father, who was classified as Untermenschen, right? That means like one tiny rank up above from Jews. The plan was to exterminate the Poles, and when they say Lebensraum, what they actually mean by that is Poland and Ukraine. Room to spread your wings So my father, as I said, hid Jewish people during the war, fought the Germans, and then he ended up in a German POW camp, Luckenwalde. And one of his friends, one of his comrades in arms actually, wrote him a letter saying, "You would have hated the Germans so much at the end of the war. You would have wanted to kill the babies in their cradles." And this is a translation, sorry, I get quite emotional when I read this, of what my father wrote back to his friend. He said, "No, quite to the contrary. When the Soviets came into Luckenwalde and gave the prisoners of war the town for 24 hours, I watched with horror and couldn't believe that decent people were able to carry out deeds which they had not even thought of a few hours earlier. They cut German linen with knives, destroyed antique furniture, and crushed exquisite Dresden porcelain under their feet. I saw Soviet soldiers and Kalmucks raping women and young girls in doorways and entrances to shops. In that moment, my youthful enthusiasm for revenge evaporated. I didn't touch any Germans or their possessions. On the contrary, I agreed to stay in a German home among single women and young girls overnight because the presence of a former prisoner of war saved them from rape, torture, and killing by Kalmucks and Soviet soldiers. I don't carry hatred inside me because it, together with envy, poisons human reason and one's attitude to life. How many stupid things I did and said in my errant youth when I wanted to sound and act like an adult, having, in fact, and this is a Polish phrase, the logic of an intellectually backward calf. So it's possible. There was some code encoded into my father, into his programming, to do with self-respect and honour. Some story that he had in his head that enabled him to swim against that tide of bloodlust and revenge and not rape the women of his enemy, but defend them. I'm going to stop now on that bit, and now I'm going to, should I go to questions now and then do the silly bit later? Yeah, let's do questions now. And then I promise you I'll end with some funny, I've only got a couple of bits. I told you, I've moved on from comedy. I did warn. So yes, please, if you have any questions, now's the time. Everyone, do we need to loosen up? Oh, yep.
I feel like a lot of storytelling wants black and white, but what you're talking about is like the 50 Shades of Grey, or like, what's your thoughts on that? Like the complexity of story and.
Well, this is the challenge that is before us, because the question said was that storytelling tends to see things in terms of black and white, and what I'm suggesting is the 50 Shades of Grey. Maybe not quite that many. I think things now, ensemble casts and ensemble stories. I think that's and long form television and all of that. I think that's opened up so that now you see at least a range of different faces, cultures, characters, I think black and white, it's a frustration I feel with the LGBT, elements of the LGBT community who, we talk about being non-binary, but by God we can be judgy and binary about to hold two things in your heart and your head at the same time is very challenging, and I think that is our job and that's why I think, looking at Joseph Herder, like you can have an idea of what you want to do, but the unintended consequences of things can be very real. And that's why I think as storytellers, we have a freaking huge responsibility because we are creating that world. So, you know what? I leave it up to you to decide how to fix it. I'm just going to say this is what I reckon is the problem, but I don't have a solution except to talk about this, to say I am positioning myself as a militant moderate, is what I would say. I would also say, I hope, because I think the robustness of those of us, we have to find ways, and look, in whatever way we speak up, to be as carefrontational, or not even, just listen or whatever, but not rush to judgment. Because it is an incredibly complex history and story, and I do love my history, I love my Russian history, I love all that. But my God, you go back through all of history and you can tell it this way, that way, that way. We could go on forever, It's like, what do we do now? I've hit my time limit, but is there can we do another question? Is that all right? Yeah, okay. Anyway, yeah, up to you all. That's our challenge, all of us, how to tell these stories, I think. Any other questions? Yeah?
Hi, Magda.
Hi.
Not so much a question, just a thank you for having the courage to break what sometimes feels like a deafening silence on the subject of Palestine and Israel. So thank you for doing that and speaking so beautifully about it.
Thank you. I just want to add that there are people who are quietly, I think, public forums, unfortunately at the moment, it's just impossible. Twitter and all those places. I will put up some links to some of the really great stuff that's going on, but I think also one thing I think is a great thing to do is to just have quiet, respectful conversations behind the scenes with people and try and find common ground. And there are quite a lot of people I know who are doing that, and certainly, I don't know what we can achieve in the Middle East, but at least in Australia, we give ourselves a hard time, but really in terms of the world's record on multiculturalism, we have done pretty well. I know there's some real deficits, but I have a low bar as well. As long as we're not mass slaughtering people, I reckon, yes, go us, well done. But, oh God, it's not, I'm not saying that low bar is where I stay at, but sometimes I think it is important to remember the things that we do right and build on that, rather than just to criticise, because it is very easy. It is very easy to criticise, Yeah, so I hope we can do that, because we're a multicultural country, and we have to find ways to make stories that include as many of us as is possible, that creates and envisions a world for all of us that is as peaceful and happy as it can be. And that is quite a challenge. Any other questions? No? No? Anyone? All right, well, I'm going to now go into silly mode, because I've gone very serious, and I think it'd be nice at this point if we actually did some trust exercises. These are things that actors do. So, can you all please stand up? Be upstanding. So, what you're going to do is you're going to turn to the person to your left, and because now in the old days we would have touched, no touching. What we're going to do, this is because in the Me Too moment, right? In the Me Too moment, there's no touching without, consent. So we're going to Reiki one another. So you're just going to turn to the left, and just send the vibe. Send the vibe. You feeling it? Isn't that nice? Okay, now turn around the other way and Reiki back the other way. Okay, and now we're going to do an actor's trust exercise. One person will stand behind, turn to your right. The person behind you will be the catcher, and the person in front, wait, and the person in front will be the faller. Don't start yet. The person in front will be the faller, but in the Me Too moment, you're not allowed to touch them. And this is not actually an exercise, this is a demonstration of how an actor feels on set with the producer, like you're falling and no one's there to catch you. So now you know how we feel. And one final thing. I couldn't possibly finish without, as I discussed with my lovely Irish friends, I do have a lot, I am like Sharon Strzelecki, Polish on one side and very Irish on the other. And so I am going to do, would you like a Sharon Strzelecki Irish dance? Okay. Right, so the thing is, I've done my knee, so I can only Irish dance from the waist down. From the waist up. I can only Irish dance from the waist up, and Carla, you'll know what that looks like. So this is what Irish dancing from the waist up when you have a bung knee looks like. Thank you.
Would you please thank Magda Szymanski? Let's give her a big cheer. Keep it going. She's here all week. Is this yours?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Right, we're going to go straight into... first up, we're going to have a video we're going to play. So we might roll that tape. It is a message from our Minister, Tony Burke. And while we're doing that, Deirdre Brennan and I are going to hop on stage. So let's go with the video.
It's Tony Burke. Last year I was able to be there with you in person at the Screen Forever conference. This year I can't, but I wanted to record a message, mainly just to pay respect to what you do. I just wanted to give you a sense, not as Minister, but just as someone who loves and respects your work, how so much of your work has just affected me and reached me. Colin from Accounts and Mother and Son, for years I remember it was so hard to find Australian sitcoms that really nailed it. You get one that had run from time to time, but those two shows, can I just say, in the new formation of Mother and Son and the completely new story in Colin from Accounts, have really allowed Australians to see their own stories and laugh along with each other. I have become far more forgiving of my rescue greyhound ever since I saw Colin from Accounts. What those pet owners go through, I wish on nobody. Also, though, with the binge dramas that have been produced, that's binge in terms of the style, not specifically the platform, although there is some crossover. I've loved seeing that Australian stories now, when they're set in the present, tend to look more like modern Australia. The jury looked like a jury you would get in modern Australia. And for a long time, that wasn't what we were seeing on our screens. Similarly, stories even set in the past, a story like The Newsreader, where we're remembering the moments in Australian history and being brought back to them with the archival footage mixing in with the characters who we've come to know over a couple of seasons, and in some ways know them even better than we know the archival footage of the actual people who we lived with during those years. In the same way, all the detail of Boy Swallow's universe. I love the story from the start, I'd love the novel, but watching that on screen, watching episode by episode with a cast that once again looked like the full breadth of Australia, but just capturing that period of history with a phenomenal cast, like absolutely phenomenal cast. But also that attention to detail. I'll never forget visiting the set of Boy Swallow's universe and seeing there on the shelf the board game test match. I remember going to my friends' places. They had test match. Mum wouldn't let me get it. I remember seeing on the wall those old World Series cricket posters that you used to get for free at McDonald's if you could recite the ingredients of a Big Mac. All of these stories are ours, and you're making sure that they're being told. And new genres and parts of Australia that haven't traditionally been thought of as being a set. So, for example, what's been done with Bay of Fires in opening up the beauty of Tasmania with the horror of that story. It's sort of, I really want to visit to see that. I don't necessarily want to visit to meet everybody who's a character in that show. This is what I want Australians to have. I want that relationship between the couch and the screen to always be there. I want when you're young for it to be there on children's content. I want when you want to know the facts for it to be there with documentary. And then I want it to be there for all the forms of drama, whether it be comedy, whether it be what we used to call the mini-series style drama, or whether it's the feature film. And I want that relationship between the chair you're sitting on and the screen you're watching to always relate to the country that you live in, for that relationship between the couch and the screen to be something that is true to cultural policy, to be something that acknowledges here in Australia, there's a place for every story and a story for every place. And when you're sitting on that lounge and you hold the remote control, I am very conscious, and this government's very conscious, of the fact that you turn on the public broadcasters of ABC or SBS and you've got guaranteed Australian content. You flick across to the commercials and you've got some guaranteed Australian content. You then press another button and you're on Foxtel and you've got guaranteed Australian content. You go to the streaming services at the moment and there's no guarantee at all. And part of why I want there to be a guarantee is because when they're producing content at the moment, it is extraordinary quality. I want that to always be the case, and we want that to have to be the case. So we're working furiously here at the moment to try to get the best outcome we possibly can within all the legal limits that we're facing, to be able to get that guarantee of making sure that no matter where your remote control goes, if you're watching from a lounge in Australia, Australian content is there for you too. So to you at the Screen Forever conference, from me on the set of Total Control, can I wish you all the best, and most importantly, just say thank you for what you do.
It is a genuine disappointment for Tony that he wasn't able to join us this week. It is a sitting week. We had to make these dates well before sitting weeks were worked out, but it's always obvious when he speaks how much passion he has for our industry and for you, and it's a great, I think, great opportunity for us when we have that sort of representation within Canberra to do good things. I think before we start, both Deirdre and I wanted to again acknowledge country and pay tribute and respect to the Yimanga language people again, and for a recognition of elders past, present and emerging. And from that basis, We are very, very fortunate to be here. And I am genuinely very, very fortunate to be sitting opposite this fabulous woman. Can we just give and acknowledge Deirdre Brennan's position and appointment as a big round of applause? It's a great excitement for us. Yes. And I know a lot of people know Deirdre in different ways. I think I've met her in 1846 somewhere on a, probably actually in the subscription TV industry. But one of the memories I have had and I carry with me was I was working in subscription television, and Deirdre, I think you were at Nickelodeon, and you welcomed me in to a pitching session with you at effectively what was the SPA conference in the Gold Coast many, many years ago. And I really did get a big insight into how different parts of the industry were operating. So it's something that I carry with me greatly. Deirdre, welcome. How does it feel to be, first of all, back in Australia? You've been away for a while. And tell me what it is that you've been doing as you sort of take the ball that you've been given and run with it effectively. What has been the first thing someone in your role does apart from go, wow, what do I do now? Tell me what you've been doing.
Listening. Oh, I love a microphone, don't I? This one. But thank you, Matt, and thank you all very much for the extraordinary welcome I've had, even when I was still in Toronto. With that welcome comes an enormous obligation. Though I got some very good advice, I have to say, from a friend, Christopher Zinn, who said, be short, be surprising, and don't tell people what they already know. So I'm going to the quiet room now. See ya.
We're over,
thanks.
bye.
No, but I think to come back with respect and to understand that I have to reconnect back into the industry and the population. The chance to hear Magda, that incredible lecture, thank you. And the minister, my minister, I have a lot to learn and a lot to listen. And it's day 50, so it doesn't happen overnight. But,
I'd like to just help reintroduce you to people that may not know you in this room. So let's just give me a sense of, I don't want this to be turned into a job interview, but what are the credentials, if you like? What are the things that you've done in your career that you want to highlight when you take a role like this that I guess, you were able to lead in the way that you're now being called on to lead? What are the things you've done that you want to express to people?
And I've spent most of my career actually at the ABC, but someone described me once as the runaway bride because I wanted to leave the ABC and experience the world both on the commercial side of the business as a broadcaster, as a distributor, as a studio. I had the privilege of being able to work for amazing organisations, including NBC Universal in New York. Imagine an Australian skipping into 30 Rock every day, or in Canada, which is I consider a second home. That North American experience and also spending quite a significant amount of time in the UK gave me the missing pieces, which is why I left 8 years ago, very much to fill in those gaps and come back home. I never thought I would be lucky enough to be in this role right now, but it's the right role. I might not be the obvious choice, but I'm definitely the right choice. And it is a job interview. But the reason why I think I am the right choice is because I come from the children's side of the business. Not only had broad experience, but there's a number of things, and I'm looking at some very dear friends who have acted as my mentors since I stepped into the children's world. And there's a reason why I think that's one of the most valuable backgrounds I can have in this role. I do understand the power of content. We live creating content that can shape generations and societies. We never take that responsibility lightly, and it's so relevant for what you were talking about, Magda. We believe we have a duty of care not just to the audience that we serve, but also to the world. So maybe it's the right time for that conversation. Can I just run through a couple of other things? We're also at the front line of change. If we don't understand our audience and what a 5-year-old is doing or a 10-year-old is doing, or the context of what it means to be 5 and 10 in this society and in families, we're culturally irrelevant. So we've had to evolve, we've had to change. Looking at the Ampere data that they presented to the children's industry 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we saw those numbers. So we are always the canary in the coal mine. We've been evolving our business models, our platforms, even the lines between distribution, marketing, and content creation for the last 10 years, but particularly for the last 2 years. So we're the greatest source of advice the industry can possibly get right now.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think there's a structural thing you're getting at there that I know we're going to have a chat about you and a chat about Screen Australia and then a bit into the industry. But let's just dive into that piece, because are we losing that fight with engaging a children's audience, and is that the biggest challenge we have in a world of YouTube and all of the opportunities that children have for consumption? Do you? I know you've got a response to
Yeah,
this, but I'm interested in, because if it is the canary in the minefield, where are we all heading? You know.
There's good news. The other thing about that genre is we are eternally optimistic, because when you're hanging out with children, how can you not be? But an example of a couple of responses in terms of the business, to be a little bit serious. The commercial and cultural bridge that we often struggle with in primetime industry or in adult content, I shouldn't say that, it kind of means something else, doesn't it? Is not a struggle.
That's a new direction for Screen Australia, adult content. So, you've heard it first, David Knox, headline.
Oh no.
No, we're joking, come on.
Commercial success, as far as a bluey toy that a family buys to experience something, is not a bad thing. It means that you've created an emotional connection. So we approach what we do and how we create content to enter into people's lives in many different ways. So we don't think just about what's on screen. Am I right? Suze, Donna? We think about the broader connection into the world that they live in, whether it's school, whether it's their family. But Wildbrain is a good example. So when we saw this happening, and particularly since we're a significant global business...
And Wildbrain was where you were working?
Yes, sorry, where I was working, based in Toronto, London, and New York, and Europe. We could see a very clear strategy to match the environment that we were in. Very traditional distribution, television broadcaster business, but we saw two areas where we needed to evolve. One of them was partner-led work. So our relationships with people like Apple, with the Snoopy Show and Peanuts, Netflix, we had great partners relationships. So we lent into that and we knew what they wanted. It's not going to be a door-to-door or a broad exposure. It's really this deep relationship with their world, and it means that they want to deal with their audience. They want to market the show. It needs to be tailored and it needs to be produced at a certain level. Came up earlier today. But on the other side, we needed to be audience-led. So we needed to have a direct relationship with our audience. Very luckily, Wildbrain was at the forefront of YouTube distribution and creation, optimized creation and storytelling for children, based on a very large catalogue of Teletubbies, you name it. We had an incredible amount of content to work with. But we also had 3 billion viewers on YouTube every month. So we started working with them and extending that into co-production arrangements, even specific content that was tailored for platforms. We started to have a direct relationship with the audience. And the business models that flowed off that were incredibly effective. For Wildbrain, that middle area, the traditional distribution pipeline, pre-sales, acquiring to feed a pipeline, was going to be challenged. So when we came to development, we were developing specifically for these areas and the financial models that came with both sides. We used to say the two bubbles. Fast channels, we started in fast channels about 4 years ago, not as a monetization, but as a reach tool. And now you look at the explosion of fast, I find it fascinating to come back to my home in the country that I love, and it seems to be that there's a shift to the partner-led model as a filling the gap, particularly in scripted, And we don't seem to be playing a lot or have a lot of awareness in this audience-led side of the business.
So how do we fix that piece? That audience-led piece strikes us as a data piece and a knowledge piece, which is really hard for individual practitioners to always get their heads around. So is there a piece you want to go to about fixing that, or should we, yeah?
There is, and it's pretty, I'm not that young, but I was very lucky to be given 2 areas a number of years ago: data and technology, me, that was interesting, and also the YouTube side of the business. And I got to spend 6 months in London with a very young team that had developed all these techniques, both in the studio and in the distribution side, the channel management side. Fascinating. I learnt so much. I couldn't believe it. And the information is out there. If you haven't looked at YouTube's 4 big bets for 2024, I did bring them with me just in case, that the CEO came out with at the beginning of this year, have a look. They're talking about creators as the next-gen studios. They're talking about the creator economy. First thing I did was went to see YouTube to build my understanding of where Australia is at in this space, and I want to go through the top 100 creators because they are probably at that front line of cultural relevance. They reflect and shape through the content that they make our population, and if we need to understand that, to me it feels like a little bit of a missing piece.
Can we, I don't want to just move, before we move into Screen Australia per se, I want to just tackle probably the question that you would be given about your role. Oh, what do you know about feature film? What are you going to possibly know about factual? What are you going to possibly know about the other thing in that world? Do you want to respond to that? And games, well, imagine some of this, how do you address that if there's concerns in an audience or in a constituency that you might not understand their world? How would you allay that concern?
And I'm lucky to have quite a broad knowledge of content creation, but I don't know what a 5-year-old is either. So, and I learn and I listen and I absorb. And to me, a very well-known Australian writer that I hope will come home soon said to me, I'm an everything person. And I'm an everything person. I don't put my experience or my thoughts or what I can contribute to a sector or a platform or a genre, because our audience doesn't. They're starting to think, even our minister was talking about the experience of someone in our population and how they interact with stories and content. They don't go, oh, I'm a feature film person only. I don't do that. I think I have a lot to learn about some areas, but I'm a fast learner. So I think there is some value, an enormous value actually, in joining the dots. Okay. And this role allows me to do that.
I'm going to keep on asking questions. Let's flip to Screen Australia. 50 days in, what's your assessment of how Screen Australia's engagement with the industry is, and how your assessment of Screen Australia's engagement with the government is? Because that's a pretty critical two relationships, amongst others, that need to be managed by you. So what's your view?
That's a very good question.
I'm glad I asked it.
Very good question. And yes, I am still listening, but I am trying to keep a consultant mindset and also bring the way I like to work. What I'm absolutely blown away by at a government and an industry level is the honesty of the conversations I've been able to have. And a very dear friend said to me, you always ask questions. And I have been asking everything from what's the purpose of Screen Australia? What do we do well? What is Australian? I started going down a rabbit hole. I've filled 2 books of notes already. So I feel that I've got some sort of level of an informed position to be able to come to that now. So firstly, I really need to tell you that there's a great team at Screen Australia. I'm getting to know everybody very well. I've never met a more passionate, dedicated group of people in all of the places that I've worked. It really blew me away because I didn't know what to expect. And can I just say congratulations to Grania Brunston. Thank you, which March 19 was a very important day for me, and that was the absolute cherry on top. But let me give you, shall I give you a bit of a sense of some of the feedback? Because in order to do a great job and be better, we have to be honest about the feedback I have received.
And our members give us the feedback, and I think we haven't yet had a chance to present, but we present each time to the agencies, and there's some gaps that our members feel. So let's go.
Let me tell you some of the points, and they're all really valid, and how I think we should address them. So, a need for a clearer sense of purpose, clarity of decision making, spreading ourselves too thin, yes, focusing only on the projects that we direct fund, too slow, too prescriptive, too much editorial input, not enough editorial input. So and all of that feedback is so valid. But what I do when I hear that, I take one step back and go, what are people trying to tell me? And my summary is that it feels like a transactional relationship with both the industry and the government that we serve. And my aim is to be a partner. So a partner, to quote Evan Shapiro, who I just, follow every word he says, yes, and even, we're not a bank. We are here to serve the storytellers, and why we do that is to serve the Australian people and our sense of cultural identity. So we're here to serve you and work out what we can do to help you thrive. Now, that's not always a check. It can be all sorts of things that we can do. So now I'm at the point of working with an amazing team to streamline how we work and really deliver on that partnership. And that comes with accountability. And, I'm very lucky. I have an amazing board, I have an amazing department and a great minister, and I have a very good guide in the national cultural policy. When I was watching that video in Toronto, it was one of the reasons I wanted to come home.
Can I ask, you are incredibly well researched, you're thoughtful, you're detailed, focused. You will have already thought about this as to what mark you want to leave in 5 years' time, at least, if you might continue on. But do you know what I mean? There's a thinking about where you want the direction, I think, of the organisation to be, and probably a legacy piece that, if I know you, you've already started to think about, because I think you're a great planner and you're forward look. But can you give us a sense of what you would like that direction to be? And you may not know all the details yet because it's day 50 or whatever it is, but I think there's something about the way you construct the world and you look ahead that I'd love to, give you an opportunity to share.
You do know me well, don't you? And I'm quoting a drama I was watching on Netflix the other day. It's a pivotal time, so let's pivot. I thought, it seems so obvious, doesn't it? We all say it's a pivotal time. And you go, pivot! Whoops. You'd think I'd know how to use a microphone by now, wouldn't you? But I don't.
Deirdre used to do the voiceovers for our
and
award
for the Spar
shows.
Awards. I did.
Because you're also the voice for the ABC, so I always think anyone that you should have every control of the microphone. You, of course, do, but keep going.
I'm a bit rusty. Nobody asked me to do free voiceovers in Canada because they didn't know.
If only.
Quite funny. Anyway, sorry. I think even as a team, we're obviously in the midst of the strategic priority work and really exploring how we can align with the national cultural policy. So I think there are a few areas that we've got a lot of work to do, and I think Gráinne being in that role is a really important start to that. And anybody can have a look at our statement of expectations from the Minister on the website. How amazing that I've got the Act, I have that. I have a lot of great documentation. Okay, some areas, you want me to be specific. All right. Come on. First Nations. It is amazing coming back to Australia because a lot has changed in 8 years for the good, but there's so much more to do. So I live and breathe and think about it every day, and how we shape that, what we do, how we prioritise, seriously prioritise, because I think we can do more, is a big area. So I don't have the answers yet, but I know where we need to go. My other big one is research data and insights. It's also in the statement of expectations, funnily enough, too. So it's lucky my roadmap's been given to me. I am surprised at the small amount of insights available to you to work with. We have very much a reporting sense. We go, look what we did, yoo-hoo! And you think, yeah, but what do we need to know for the future? Where is the understanding of segmentation in our Australian population? There's nothing there. And dear Kate Hickey in our team is helping me work through what research is available. I don't understand the Australian audience right now. I know what I think, but it's all disjointed. I've gone through so many reports. We've got serious work to do to provide you with the information you need to be creative entrepreneurs. It feels like you're only getting a piece of it. I just think we need to do that work for you. And boy, do I have an amazing cohort in the States. I just think you don't know how powerful that group is. We're going to work together. And you, we've already started talking about it. Sorry, you. We can do a lot, and we need to apply resources. We need to be strategic about this. Screen currency hasn't been done since 2016. These are the nuts and bolts of who we are and what we do. If we don't understand ourselves, we can never represent that 80%. We have to know who the 80% is. That's a promise. I hope in 5 years, please, can I still have the job in 5 years? You can turn around and go, she delivered on that. And one more thing.
Yeah.
I really want a new term for platform agnostic. But I have been living and breathing it in the children's world for the last, how many years? Decade? And I have to say, I come back and I go, nothing's really changed. It just feels like we've moved our attention somewhere else. We have to all, and even if we don't want to play where Australians are, we have to understand what they're doing and what they're getting. It's not about what device they're using, it's about what need are they satisfying by the content that they're finding in different places, and how can we reflect that cultural relevance in what we do and what we're experts. So they're my big themes for the moment, but honestly, we've just really started kicking off the work. So I never come in and say, this is what we need to be doing. I'm now matching all of that feedback with all of our thoughts and priorities, and there'll be an exciting plan for the next 3 years.
Well, and this speaks a little bit to your operational knowledge and know-how and skill, but and look, we've talked a little bit about this, but when I was in the agency, I was constantly aware of basic databases that didn't speak to each other, matching sets of information that, if it was really well designed, would be able to provide really important insights if it was able to be presented to people, both about business cases, skills around returns on investment, layers of information that as entrepreneurial businesses that are operating in silos don't receive and need guidance around. So do you want to just touch on that? Because I know we've talked about it and it's really critical.
Yes, and there's a bit of a microcosm within Screen Australia. We have new systems, we have legacy systems, and it's all tied together with sticky tape. I love the fact that I can say sticky tape and people know what I'm talking about, and string. So very surprising, someone like me walking in and being able to talk to somebody who works in data analytics. I'm going, wow, your APIs are really bad and we need to change the data flow and we're going to do this and we probably need to go outside to fix it. It was probably one of the greatest moments of my life, actually, being able to go, hey, we have to get our technology right, and then we have to work out what partners and what data is available, don't we, Kate? And we've got a lot of work to do, but we're going to start with our own house.
One of the disappointments, to be honest, for me around Revive was that there wasn't in there a return of full money to Screen Australia. There was to the Australia Council, which has become Creative Australia. And so I think, and you may have a similar view, but I'm interested in what you think your budget should be. You may not want to volunteer that publicly because I'm going to give you an out, but I also would love you to, because I think there's a conversation about what the agency needs to do its job that we haven't had as a raw, open conversation. And I think we have the opportunity with this government to have that conversation and be more proactive around it, because I think in the past it's been you've got to be careful about advocating and all that sort of stuff. I think there's an opportunity to be more direct with this government, and we have a receptive minister to do that. So I'm conscious of what your limitations are, and that conversation feels like it's an important one for industry to support you with.
Good question. We're about to enter a budget cycle, and the nature of the world at the moment, I don't love, but people saying survive 25, make it till 26. It's very hard to do long-range planning, 5-year budget plannings, and budget plannings, it's a new word. We have to work out our priorities. We can't continue to try and keep everybody serviced for the money that we have. So I think this strategic work, even though we are running in parallel to a budget cycle, is incredibly important. I also don't believe you should ask for anything until you earn the respect of the people that you're asking it for. I think we have to get to that partnership mode and working
with government
and with you and with the industry to say what are the areas, by the time we work out, and we're on the way, to working out what's really important for the screen sector and what funds do we need. I ran 3 P&Ls, so I'm fiscally responsible. I came from a public broadcaster background. I need to know what I want more money for. So I think we need to take the time to work that out. I will, if I think I can deliver for both the industry and the Australian people, I will be asking. So I don't want to say what for right now, but I would only do that in partnership with the people in this room and Creative Australia, because I think there's a huge opportunity for us to collaborate.
But given that you've got to carve up some money, and you're probably doing it in every funding round now, is it sort of just business as usual till you have that plan of where the new dissection of money should be? Or how are you going to engage the industry in perhaps a change ahead? Because that will create its own set of politics, of course, as people feel either winning or losing on this. Yeah. So how does one manage that? I think there's been an avoidance of those conversations with the industry, probably because they end up creating challenges, and we've got to work through them together.
The great thing is I reflect the honesty that's been shared with me. I think you have to make decisions that are informed, that are based on data and insights and understanding and long-term thinking, and then communicate it. But you also have to do the work. So I do see the year ahead as a transitional year, but we're really looking at sort of 3 years and where the need is and where the impact will be. It includes lots of other areas like exploring impact investment, private investment. What does a blended investment environment look like? There's a lot of work we need to do before we can put that flag in the ground and say this is what we need to do. And it will be from consultation and collaboration that we get to that point.
I'm interested in segueing slightly towards how the whole industry's tracking and how that might go. And one of those areas is I think is a useful one around how businesses that are creating content sort of survive in this environment, and how their earnings can be, how the important role of Screen Australia kind of being an umpire in a lot of the decisions that between broadcasters and the production industry, or streamers in the production industry, has traditionally been, where you guys have your terms of trade and there's requirements that come with that. So I'm interested in whether how you're observing the stability of production businesses in this market, and what's needed to maybe develop and continue to make them grow, other than perhaps your whistleblowing and important role that you're doing to kind of help protect us all.
I do think you summed it up in your opening. For any of you that missed it, you really put out a call to action for us to act as a community. And robust conversations and disagreements, and I had an amazing meeting with a Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, where I wrote down so many quotes about having those robust conversations make us who we are, because we can come together after those and still go and have a drink at the end of the day. But I do think using federal institutions or bodies to be as a form of leverage to guide negotiations. I'm a very much in favour of mediation, probably because of spending so much time in Canada, and I took part in a lot of mediations. I truly
touch on that? Yeah.
Well, Canada is probably the most regulated media environment in the world. You know it well. And the way that they approach disputes is unique. And taking part in mediation processes or the way things are worked out is really very Canadian and quite special. We're a little bit more robust than that. We have meaty conversations. But I do think sometimes we should just get in a room and work it out. And what comes from that is that stronger sense of community that you highlighted earlier, saying there is no problem we can't solve together. My feeling for the industry as a whole is a need for creative entrepreneurship. So even if we don't understand something, where else can we move? I often put out a little thing in the universe to say, I wonder if anybody's going to say anything is possible to me today. And it was at the Broad Horizons breakfast. I won't embarrass Aaliyah by telling her it was oh, I did. She said anything is possible. And talking to these amazing creators about where they like to play, and as far as animation or a mix or different platforms, or start with a podcast and all that. Like, what an inspiration. I get goosebumps when I think about it. You think we tend sometimes not to do that. Back to the children's side, the creator of Bob the Builder and Paw Patrol, that's his mantra, Keith Chapman. Anything is possible. Any conversation he has, and this is why these forums are important, has turned into a very, very successful track record. So I do think we do need that. To your point, though, about how we can influence the industry, I think data and insights will help inform that, and opportunities, facilitating conversations. But I do think there is a role for the protection of independent voices.
Let's talk about that, because I know you really are passionate about that, and I think that's critical to how we remain genuine, authentic, and I think that you will get a positive response in the audience, but that is, it runs in the DNA of really as to why Screen Australia exists. I think if you boil it down, that is, it is trying to create some independent thinking and a sector that's independent. So do you want to touch on how you might deliver this?
Yes, and I don't know if I'm right yet, and to be able to have a brains trust like our state representatives is incredibly valuable. My impression coming back after 8 years is that there's incredible support and willingness to give back to new talent. So all of this sort of emerging practitioner programs and enthusiasm, like some of our most established and experienced practitioners, everybody is saying, I want to give back, I want to give back. So we focus here. We also have incredible business leaders who are, like, and I think of Joe Werner, congratulations on the BBC Studios investment, Kylie, well done. Why is that a bad thing? If you've got to, this is personal, me saying this, but if you've got to the point where you want to grow and you have a great partner who wants to come and invest in that growth and provide opportunities, I celebrate that. I think that's extraordinary. I also know it's not always easy because I've been on the other side, and what it means, because you lose that independence, it's not easy. You have to become the advocate in a very large global organisation for Australian creators. Yes? So that's not easy, because I've also done that. So I celebrate that. But how do we get people from here to here? How do we unhook them from the path that we all had with incredible gatekeepers of funding content and establishing skills? And I was so lucky. I started in the announce booth at the ABC, and I was given extraordinary opportunities to grow and develop. And the voiceover girl got this job because it took time. I just worry that we understand we have to support this next generation and we celebrate the success of people that I've grown up with. But what do we do here? I want to be able to give people the ability to create their independent voice, to find the partners that they want, to facilitate opportunities to talk directly to audiences, to find out what they really want to do, and to find out what impact they can make as an individual and as businesses. I would like to do more in that space.
Well, to me, that is a narrative we've had it previously, which is about how the middle of our industry is challenged, perhaps mostly squeezed in different ways. If you're sitting in an international sort of era, you have a lot of support. If you're starting out, there's pathways. The middle piece. I want to maybe also use the opportunity to talk about the value or role of holding intellectual property and also taking that into export frames and thinking about how we're presenting ourselves globally and what opportunities there may be. I think Canada was always very clear on that direction, at least from a government level, and you see the delegations and the sort of output of missions and trade and all those sort of pieces. Do you see the opportunity in Australia that's untapped here, or is it something that we're doing quite well already?
IP is everything. But in that model that I mentioned from WildBrain, partner-led or audience-led, the way you work with your IP or what you might be prepared to partner on from that IP perspective changes depending on what you want to achieve. But it's your crown jewels. It's things that you have to hold on to. And what amazed me about this morning is the amount of original IP, and they were framing it even in the conversations about what they were developing. And IP doesn't expire. It might not be the right thing today, but you might come back to it in 20 years. I have been very lucky that we have never had conversations really, or partners or deals where we haven't been able to protect the rights that we wanted.
Why? Because you had greater leverage as a business at the time, or because you had a sort of an institutional understanding, or is there? I sometimes worry about is what feels to be happening at the moment, that with the industry's getting bullied into deals and people being played off each other and being told they need to accept deals because everyone else has done that, and we sort of end up in a trajectory of downward slide for a lot of people trying to hold IP. And
I agree. I understand.
which I think is a real risk. And I'm trying to think of how maybe in other countries that is protected differently, or if Brain just had such a
No, it's
robust...
always the battle, and as we're increasingly globalised, it's not going to get easier. But I actually do think there's flexibility coming into those sort of more global interactions that's really terrific. It's completely different to the way it was 8 years ago, where it was all or nothing. What I'm trying to say, and this is, see if I can get this right, it needs to go up the process. Pull it forward. So when you go into those conversations, you're coming from an informed place about where you want to be, and also the other side. It's the classic sort of negotiating technique of saying, what do they want? What do they need? If you frame the conversation in a way that you understand what is your absolute deal breaker, but you also understand what you can do, and it. Like, what else can I bring you? Can I actually bring you understanding about what this audience is doing over here, or I can actually do this? It's not always easy, and it takes experience, but you have to do what is right for you. The one thing I would say is your rights position. We talk so much about streaming or platforms or online. I haven't used the word online for 5 years. I'm thinking we really need a new term. Or maybe we just don't talk about online. It's just part of storytelling. But if you have proof of concept and proof of audience engagement, not ratings, not numbers necessarily, some understanding of a connection, whether it's a deep engagement with 10 people or 2 million people, it's going to put you in a much better position. Most of the sort of commissioning landscape internationally at the moment won't even look at something without having some proof of engagement somewhere, something they can either use to justify the investment or the fact that it's filling part of their remit that they haven't been able to do. It's incredibly important to have that knowledge, I think, to take into those conversations about rights. For example, I went to the Home Entertainment Association summit the other day. I just, it's the education of Deirdre. I'm finding out all about everything. And, $300 million a year of transactional rights value we have in this country. This is not about selling Blu-ray discs. This is a complete change of windowing structures internationally. We had an amazing experience of accidental revenue. We put some piece of content up on Amazon because we only had to tick the box, and what's that? I won't even tell you how much it was. But understanding, to me, transactional rights is a huge opportunity.
We're not talking about that at all, though, are we, really?
No!
So
we talk about theatrical windows, and we have an extraordinary group, Marketplace, led by Raquel, who I know is here. That's the greatest asset that is available to all of us to understand some of the value that's coming through windows and the change in structure.
Raquel, your inbox is going to be full
Hello.
soon, I think, because people are starting to talk about Raquel's skills.
She's amazing. What a absolute goldmine to have that understanding. But all of this comes because of the transactional windows that came about because of COVID. We were investigating it, and then, pandemic automatically changed everything. We don't think about it. And we were actually, in a number of cases, if we could work out how to do it, we wanted to release things on EST, DTO, DTR first. And some of the community work in the US about how people are releasing content through community-based apps. And with a pay-it-forward financial mechanism, they were in a very healthy position. So there's different things. We just have to be able to tell you about them.
Any other crystal ball gazing we should think about now as a sector? Marketing, distribution, opportunities, the expansion of where our businesses could be. What are you thinking the pathways or opportunities generally are? It was being asked in the Butterfly Effect, the ABC panel, about where are the opportunities for businesses to be. What do you want to touch on?
Two things. I loved that panel, but I was a little surprised that we're still at that point of saying, does the world like us? It's like, and I was so glad Benjamin and then everybody and Adrian got into the rhythm of saying, well, MasterChef Australia, all these sort of things. We already have an enormous presence in the world, but we also have to broaden our scope from just that premium drama. So often when we talk about the state of the industry, it's premium drama. And you think, actually, I go to see David Mott at ITV because they've got the largest Australian audience, probably the shows that they're producing, all of these extraordinary sort of connections into an Australian and global audience are probably not the ones that you think of. And I actually believe that we should and we will demand attention globally. Because it's already happening, but I think we keep looking for examples of, oh yes, they did that, I'll do it that way. We have the right to be part of a global audience because they love what we do. Trying to create content to fit that global audience is never going to work. So it comes back to who we are and what we do. There's so much. I love everything from MasterChef Australia as an extraordinary export to Colin from Accounts, which was a bit like an accidental discovery. I was in London at the time. People kept running into me going, have you seen Colin from Accounts? It was just the best thing ever. So there's no one way, but all of that global opportunity is driven by relationships, access, and understanding. So again, our role as a partner, if we're about content funding, if we're about industry development, and we've covered that off, that last piece is global engagement. How can we help you form those relationships? Because that's how content gets the opportunity to cut through. And I think we're already doing it. I think it's more about an issue of discoverability internationally than actually finding people to work with. Oh, the one other thing is I do think, crystal ball, this is the moment for the resurgence of film. The risk-averse nature of commissioning globally at the moment, and it can be out of the UK and Europe, UK more, if we're only going to get 30% of budgets being contributed to by public broadcasters, that's a struggle. In North America, unless you have that proof or some way of being able to say, this is something you need to invest in. They're so risk averse, they're frozen in a mergers and acquisitions mode. There's not going to be any great movement there for a while. So I do think those independent creative voices are going to come from film. And the resurgent comes from the audience that will be looking for fresh stories, distinct ideas, things that are different, things that maybe aren't proven. And there's a risk to that, but isn't it worth taking that swing? I'm a television person, I'm a YouTube person, but I actually think those voices will come from film, and we have a responsibility as an industry to support people that want to tell their stories in that way.
Deirdre Brennan, it's a great way to wrap up a conversation. What I like about Deirdre is she's incredibly optimistic, smiling and engaging all the time, and with a spine made out of steel. And when we talk about mediation and going into bat for an industry, I think we're going to uncover a great warrior, a champion for us overall. It is
And a partner.
And a partner. And a partner. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us. I think there's, maybe I'll just wrap it where we started. I think there's a genuine excitement and interest in you and goodwill to see all your successes flourish, because I think that will be powerful for a sector. I also am so excited about the opportunity to continue conversations. This is a global event. We want to make this an event that's bigger for a global engagement. We know that you're an important partner at this event. We appreciate that, and all your team that are here. Could you please join with me in officially welcoming again Deirdre Brennan and celebrating her. And we are wrapping up today. I think I've been on stage way too much. Other people will be doing the rest of the heavy lifting. In about an hour, we'll have opening drinks down at 7 o'clock, and you get a little break to do whatever. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.